This week on the Hollywood in Toto podcast, we share why the latest True Detective installment is off to a very woke start. We talk with the Oscar-nominated screenwriter Roger L. Simon about the sorry state of Hollywood, and we hear some amazing behind-the-scenes stories. I am not using that term loosely. Very cool. And we get the latest example of actors who have very, very thin skins. Paper thin. Wafer thin, as they say.
Welcome to the Hollywood in Toto podcast. Entertainment news and reviews without the woke Hollywood narrative. Free speech, free expression. Now that's entertainment. And here's your host, award-winning film critic, Christian Toto.
Before we jump in, I'd love it if you subscribe to the Hollywood in Toto podcast. We've got new episodes each Wednesday and then bonus episodes on most weekends. Check it out. Sometimes I sit down to watch a TV show or a movie that is not part of my job. I put that critic hat off to the side and I just click on the remote and watch some TV. Really. I watch so many shows and films for work that sometimes I just want to uncouple. I want to just watch something on my own for my own pleasure. No job, no assignments, nothing. And I end up watching a lot of really bad horror movies as a result. I've got some regrets about it, but you know what? It's my jam, and it makes me feel de-stressed, and I like it. But I recently wanted to watch something a little bit better, something headier, something more august. So I decided to watch the new True Detective series. Now, the show has been around for 4 seasons. This is season number 4, and it's called Night Country. That's the subtitle for this current iteration. And it looks good on paper. It stars the great Jodie Foster. She's an Oscar winner. How bad could it be? She's one of those actresses who doesn't work a ton. So when she does appear in something, I'm thinking, okay, this project really appealed to her. There was something about it that spoke to her. She doesn't work nonstop. I'm going to give it a try. And the show does start out strong. We watch a bunch of Alaskan researchers, and they go missing in this very creepy opening segment. And also, this is set in Alaska during the time of the year where there's just no daylight, all darkness. And that, too, interests me. You don't see that very often. I'm in. I can't wait to see what happens next. And again, the fact that Jodie Foster is here, and the fact that Jodie Foster is 61, and she's not hiding her age. She hasn't had extreme makeover effects or anything like that. Good for her. I know there's so much pressure to stay forever young in Hollywood, but you know what? Jodie Foster is a huge talent. She should just be who she is, and that's exactly what she's doing. Again, great sign. And then the show got woke in a hurry. And I'll just throw you a few examples. I'm going to leave some out because there's a lot here. The Foster's character, she's a cop, and she's instantly dressing down her male colleagues. She knows better. They're dumb. They've missed the clues. She just barges in and catches them all. And then several characters are being dismissive of other people in the show for being, it's coming, white. And then we see a throwaway moment where there's a main character who sabotages someone's gas tank because that guy, the car's owner, was bragging about a sexual conquest he had planned. Woke 101. Again and again and again. And all these moments, they really take you out of the story, which is exactly what should not be happening. Now, here's the problem with woke stories in general. They're often not very good. I think there's something about the urge to send a message in your story, above all else, that hurts the overall storytelling process. Now, it's not always the case. There are definitely exceptions. And the one I use a lot is the film Booksmart. I think it was like 2019. It's a comment about 2 girls going through high school, the usual hijinks, super woke, super progressive. But you know what? It was clever, it was funny, it was different, it was fresh. So it was woke, and it was pretty darn good. But again, exceptions. There are enough examples of bad woke shows we can see a pattern here. Now again, this is just the first episode. A lot of woke, a lot of confusing subplots. Didn't really get my attention the way a show should, especially after the first episode. But there are 5 more installments. Jodie Foster remains an excellent actress. There could be lots of layers here that I just haven't been able to see yet. Maybe all the woke virtue signaling would fade away and we'll just get into a great story in the True Detective tradition. Maybe. Or it could get worse and I could shake my head and I could say to myself, there's got to be some sort of bad horror movie I could be watching instead of this, right? Here's your movie trivia question of the week. How many times was Ferris Bueller absent before he hacked the school's computer system in the great 1985 comedy Ferris Bueller's Day Off? The answers at the end of the show. You know, if I had Roger L. Simon's resume, I would need at least 3 sheets of paper to capture it all. Maybe 4. His screenwriting credits include Bustin' Loose, Scenes from a Mall with Woody Allen, and Enemies: A Love Story. That film earned him an Oscar nomination for Best Adapted Screenplay. Not too shabby. Of course, beyond that, he's a celebrated author. He's had fiction and nonfiction books. He also created Pajamas Media. It's now known as PJ Media, but it was one of the first alternative media platforms that was trying to hold the media honest. God bless them. He really was one of the first people in that huge wave, which is still washing over the culture right now, and thank you for it. He also served as the president of PEN America. That's a free speech group. He was part of their West Coast branch. This guy does it all, and that's just like a partial look at all the gigs he's had over the years. These days, he's a contributing editor at the Epic Times. He's also the author of a brand new book. Great timing. It captures the chasm between the red and blue states in America. Like I said, he knows what he's talking about, and he's always on the edge of the culture. The book is called American Refugees, the Untold Story of the Mass Exodus from blue states to red states. Now, in the upcoming conversation, Roger shares more about that book, as well as the time he had a big argument with, of all people, Andrew Breitbart. I couldn't believe when I heard this story, but that's just one of many stories of behind the scenes at Hollywood that you're going to hear in this conversation. It's always a treat to check in with Roger L. Simon. I hope you enjoy this great conversation with a lot of revelations. Trust me. Roger, thanks for joining the show. You know, there's so much change in Hollywood right now. The technology, streaming, video on demand, the dueling strikes, which were finally resolved. I was curious, just from your perspective, you have such an interesting look at what's going on. You've been around Hollywood for years, done so much. What jumps out at you the most when you think about Hollywood today? I know people talk about, will the box office come back and how is streaming going to impact things, obviously. But from your perspective, what's your take on it? What jumps out at you about this moment in time from a creative point of view?
Well, I think what the problem is not so much the big dichotomy between left and right that we all know about. Mm-hmm. I think that we're in an ADHD era. I mean, there is so many avenues for material to be sent out to us, whether it means going to the theater, which was nostalgically the best experience, to 10 million ways online. And I don't think the consumer of this knows where to go.
It is confusing for sure.
And what happens is you go nowhere, or you go to someplace and you see a little bit, and then you have ADHD programmed into you, literally, by the phone, so that you're willing to click off in 3 minutes. What happened? You know, I know I'm still an Academy member after all these years, but I don't get out to the movies much. And so coming this time of year, I'm privileged to be able to watch for my overpaid dues virtually all the theatrical films online with a code that they give to the members of the Academy. So I sit there with my wife and we look at the one-line descriptions of each of them, and we go, "Oh no, and by the time we're done with this, it's already too late and we haven't watched the news." I only watched the prominent ones. I mean, so I've watched, of course, what they call Barbenheimer now these days. Mm-hmm. And, my reaction to Barbie was cute, but too long. Mm. And my reaction to Oppenheimer was, well, this is a very impressive piece of work. But now, a month later, I'm wondering, what was it really?
Hmm.
because it didn't, it doesn't resonate on the subject. Now, this is really hard to do, and I don't blame the filmmaker. It's just, I don't know what I would have done, despite the fact I grew up around the bomb in a weird way because my father was a radiologist and was involved with the Manhattan Project.
Oh gosh.
So I'm a kind of selective viewer of this. Isidore Rabi was a great character in that movie, and I remember him from the age of 3.
Hmm. You know, it's funny
So
you mentioned your reaction to that film because I saw it after all the hype, and I thought this is such a pristine, perfect presentation. Everything was immaculate. The sound, the lighting, the acting, and I didn't feel moved by the movie, and I was disappointed by that. I didn't feel the emotional heft, even though I think everything on paper
it's
was.
exactly, I am exactly in sync with you on that. I was impressed with all those things when I saw it. Um, and I thought, well, I'm supposed to really like this. I sat through it. It's a long movie. Uh, but now looking back on it, the emotional heft is a very good description because what that movie lacked, and what a lot of films, except for the idiot woke movies, have lacked, is a why to it.
Mhm.
In ways, I mean that, and maybe I'm just an old grouch, but I think maybe that's a factor of that ADHD thing too, because people don't know what to do.
Mhm. Well, I mean, I think storytelling is in your DNA. So if on a gut level you have that reaction, I wouldn't discount it. Before we move on, were there any of the recent, I call them Oscar bait movies, that impacted you that you thought were actually quite good that you could recommend or that really stuck with you?
Well, the movie I like the best so far of looking at these, and I haven't looked at enough of them, and I'm gonna have to crush through a few before I vote. It was ironically the Yogi Berra
No,
documentary.
I haven't seen that yet. I'm a Yankees
Oh,
fan, so I need to see
well,
it.
I don't know. I'm older than you, so I remember Yogi Berra, and I grew up in New York, so I remember this man as one of the icons of my youth. But I didn't realize what a stupendous person he
Hmm.
was.
Okay.
And this documentary that was made by his granddaughter, who was a lovely girl in this thing, and it's you're talking about emotional heft. This had emotional heft because it was made by a young woman who loved and adored her grandfather and wished to get that information, wished that we all did, and we
Mhm.
all do when we watch the movie.
Yeah.
So there's a message in that.
Yeah.
Uh,
There's the
there's
why.
story. What stories do we want to tell in what years is now? God,
Yeah.
2024.
Yeah. You know, one of the things I wanted to ask you about is that in the last few years, we've seen, you can call them rebel outlets, the Daily Wire, making movies that you wouldn't see elsewhere. I've seen some really good documentaries of late that were competent and compelling and revealing. And again, they weren't made within the system, so to speak. Do you see this?
Well, I write about that quite a bit in my book about their documentary, the What Is a Woman
Mhm.
documentary, which I saw at their premiere, and I thought really was very good.
Yes.
I think they're less successful in the fictional area, but I'm a snob.
Mhm.
Uh,
Well, but also it's harder to. I mean, they're kind of starting from scratch in a way. So I think
yeah,
hopefully they will grow.
and I don't think that the online kind of conservative approach to that is right. For documentaries, is right. I
Mhm.
mean, at the Epoch Times, where I work, they've done some very good documentary work too. Their January 6th thing is very good.
Mhm.
Uh, and sometimes I try to induce them to go in the fictional area, and they're actually flirt with it. But I think that there's something about all good movies transcend that political slantedness.
Hmm.
There's something we want in a movie that is not, that in the same sense that that's what you want out of a great novel. You don't want propaganda, you want the human spirit.
Gotcha. And do you think that what do you think is stopping Epic Times from going in that direction, or what would be the hesitation? Is that
Okay, cash,
yeah, it's just too much money.
the expense of it.
Yeah.
If you're, a script, that my wife and I wrote years ago, uh, called The Party Line. We've been trying to get them to do it, but and they like it. It's a good script. Everybody's written good and bad scripts, and I'm very honest about the bad ones. I'm honest about the good ones, but I mean, because the audience knows anyway. I
Yeah.
mean, you can if you say, "Well, that was a great movie," and everybody knows it wasn't. So, and movies that you've written that were not your fault, which is sometimes true, but you never really know because making a movie is a tag team operation.
And even a great script can go awry if other pieces don't fall into place.
Oh boy.
Well, you just mentioned that script you're talking about, which has potential and is good. Is that something that you could bring somewhere at this point? I mean, we're in 2024. There are these
Not
emerging
likely.
outlets, but
Not likely. First of all, it's a small film, and
mhm.
it was something we wrote many years ago. So I'm not. If I go back into this, and it's a very big if,
Mhm.
I want to go back to a commercial films to bring people into the theater. That doesn't mean they shouldn't be topical or interesting. I mean, that they should be, but what I miss in the movies is the experience of going to the movies.
Mhm.
Otherwise, otherwise, I'm not interested anymore.
Yeah.
I'd rather write another book and just I've been doing that.
Mhm. You mentioned Epic Times, obviously the Daily Wire. The Blaze is hinting at more production in this arena. If they were talking to you and you could kind of check in with their brain trust, is there advice you'd give them? How would you steer them? I mean, it's such a monumental task to get into this business. The odds are against them, but you have the savvy and the know-how and the narrative chops. I was kind of curious, how would you guide them? What would you say to them?
It's all about the script. It's always all about the script.
Hmm.
That's the sad truth. I mean, in the old days of Hollywood, that who was it? One of the old moguls said, if it ain't on the page, it ain't on the stage."
Yeah.
I tried my hand at directing, and I didn't do a good job. And the reason I didn't do a good job is my best scripts were directed by other people.
Hmm.
I had the hubris to think, because I had worked with Paul Mazursky and Woody Allen, people like that, that it was all done by the maestro on the stage. The Fellini kind of thing. Oh, get over there and and emote, and there's no time for that. The money is being spent at a breakneck pace, and if you, in some movies I worked on, I was in the next room to the sound, Bustin' Loose, which was up and down all the time, but not a great movie, but it could have been really good, and made a huge amount of money anyway because Richard Pryor was in it. But because of all the craziness that was going on during the production, even Pryor burning himself to death practically, I was off stage, 20 feet away, furiously rewriting
Oh my gosh.
to match things that have been screwed up. And it's an experience.
Yeah.
I did it as well as anybody could do it. Nobody could do it well, because you can't do that under fire so well. It just can't.
Yeah.
Writing is hard. So, I've seen it.
Mhm.
So my advice, my advice is, I think these people know it to some extent. Try to think of what drove you to the theater in the first place. And also be honest with yourself. Is that not, one of the things I got into this is going to really might interest your listeners.
Mhm.
Many years ago, I got into a fatal fight with the late Andrew Breitbart. We were friends, and this ended our friendship, and it's mostly my fault. But I apologized to him, and he never took the apology. But in any case, we were on an internet TV show years and years ago. This must have been 2007, something like that. I can't think. And the subject was already conservatives being discriminated against in Hollywood. And Andrew was going on and on about this. And then I intervened and said, well, look, the truth of the matter is, if you're not Steven Spielberg, everybody is discriminated against in Hollywood. And maybe conservatives a little bit more, but it's your talent down. And then he got into an argument. He said, no, it's the conservatives, and I said something very mean. I said to him, well, you're beginning to sound like Jesse Jackson.
Oh.
So he took umbrage, and he said, no, I'm Martin Luther King, which was ridiculous. Anyway, and from then on, he badmouthed me everywhere.
Oh, it's a shame.
And I apologized to him. He's not Jesse Jackson. But the point that I made is true, I think. Finally, it's your talent. You've got to, what happened to a lot, conservatives were disinterested in the arts to a great degree. And certainly their fat cats were. They were much more interested in putting their money into the Philharmonic so they could have their name in the vestibule there. But Beethoven doesn't need any help, but they acted like, and we, they don't. A couple of occasions, I was offered the opportunity that I jumped at because I had actually made movies in Hollywood, and also because I had executive quote unquote experience because I ran PJ Media for several years to run a quote conservative film company. Mm-hmm. I don't know exactly what that is, but in any case, I jumped at the idea, but the people never came up with the money.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard that so much from all different people across the right-leaning entertainment space. It's always about money, and it was about the lack of money. And like you said, what I hear more often is that conservatives with deep pockets would rather give to a campaign, even if it crashes and burns, than to pop culture, even though pop culture can endure.
Yeah, well, yes, that definitely. But also what I said, they do tend to give to the Philharmonic in their cities so that their name can be up there in on the marble wall,
Yeah. Huh. I want to ask about American Refugees, but I did have one question. I know you worked with Woody Allen. Any thoughts on what he's gone through in recent years? I go back and forth. I don't think he's a saint. I don't think he did what he's accused of doing, but we don't know. Hollywood adored him for years and basically slammed the door in his face based on accusations without proof. How do you look upon Woody Allen at this point?
I fairly similarly to you, even though I know him not well. I knew him during the period we were making Sonny's from a Mall. Mm-hmm. And what was remarkable about that is that he didn't want to do a lot of takes during and it was driving Mazursky crazy. And he was the whole thing was miscast. That movie was not when I really was the one who wrote it. Although Paul's name is also on it. I mean, that's the way we work. Essentially, I did it. He would name on it too. But anyway, that's common in Hollywood. But what happened was we had intended to write it for it to be Jack Nicholson and Angelica Houston. Actually.
Oh gosh.
A very different thing because they had a relationship. The idea that Woody Allen would be married to Bette is ridiculous. Look at the women he was with.
That's right.
You know, there was no, you know, but part of it was the reason it happened that way, and I'll get to Woody in a second.
Sure.
The reason it happened that way is that it was the fastest green light I'd ever seen. We turned that script in. It was just after Enemies was like loaded everywhere, and went in to meet with Jeff Katzenberg, and the first thing he said, "Well, this is great. Who do you guys want?" The script had been secretly slipped to Meryl Streep, who had said yes to it. So we said that to Katzenberg. He nodded and said, "Who do you want for the guy?" So we were talking about, well, a lot of big names. And then he said, "Well, what about Woody?" And we said, "What do you mean? He doesn't do other people's movies." At that point, he didn't, except for one way back. So, but we walked out of the office there. And of course, we were both suckers for what Katzenberg said, because at that particular point in time, Woody was the king of the movies.
Oh yeah,
yeah. So you know, so we're you know, I could see Paul was flattered as hell, and so he said, I remember that he's dead now. I can say that he said, "Well, he's going to reject it anyway. Let's give it a shot." 24 hours later, he accepted it.
Wow.
But 12 hours after that, Streep said she's not doing it with him because she hated him from working with him.
Oh, gosh.
So he's just all dirty, but it's all true. So Katzenberg was thrilled because he didn't want her. He wanted Bette. He said, "Well, Paul's work with Bette. That's great. It'll be." He was thinking box office, back, you know.
Sure.
And that's how it got cast that way, and it turned into something that was supposed to be half funny into jokey and stupid.
Yeah.
And on the set, which brings us back to the what you were asking, is that Woody would say always to Paul, "Got it?" meaning after a take, right? Then he'd be gone, and we couldn't figure it out what was going on. But he'd be in his trailer, and that was the beginning of his relationship with Sonia.
Oh gosh.
We learned afterwards. We didn't realize at the time because actually Mia was around with, you know, how many of those adopted kids there were? A dozen? I can't even remember, but there were. You know, they were all over the place, and we wouldn't have dreamed of this. But it was happening without our knowing.
Yeah.
And I think it hurt the movie too, in a way, but it was miscast anyway. So I don't. And you know, Woody is famous for. I've never been on his sets for shooting them very fast, and also he. Had that strange privilege in all his contracts of being able to reshoot for 10 days after the movie was shot.
So you have that control.
So it's like, I don't know anybody who's had that.
Yeah, that's interesting. But I wanted to get to American Refugees, and I want to preface it this way. For a while now, I keep looking across the country, and I see democratic cities burning. I see crime rates soaring. I see all this pain and suffering, and I say to myself, why aren't people voting a different way? Why aren't people reacting? Why aren't people revolting in a sense, in any fashion? But they are. And what American Refugees does tell us is that they're leaving. They're going from blue states to red states. Talk about how the subject came to you, and also just dig a little deeper into this exodus, because it's fascinating.
Yeah, well, the subject didn't come. It happened to me. I mean, living to me, I'm a unique story. It's my story in the book, but it's also a story of other people. But in my case, of course, it relates in some ways to the movies, because I realized after I came out as more conservative, I wasn't getting the phone calls, but that didn't propel me to move so much. What propelled me to move was having in my mailbox the written message, "We know where you live."
Wait, what? Literally?
"We know where you live" was scrawled on a piece of paper and stuffed in my mailbox.
Oh my gosh.
In the Hollywood Hills.
Huh, wow.
Yeah, putting it the way I explain it is that the Muslims are not the only ones who dislike apostates, because apostasy makes people very angry. If I had been a conservative all my life, which I wasn't, I would have been understood a little bit more.
Sure.
I mean, but now I was more of a threat personally. But that's not the only reason we left. I mean, we left because it had become untenable to live where we were living. I mean, we had a nice home in the Hollywood Hills, but people were, gradually the homeless were coming down from Mulholland Drive. We drive our daughter to school, and we'd see people defecating in the alleys next to La Brea. I mean, it was a very unfortunate place to live. And did you want to really spend the rest of your life there?
Yeah.
And the issue, I was on Dennis Prager the other day, and also with Victor Davis Hanson. I've done long interviews with them both, who were great men. And they both raised the question of, do you stay in California? In this case, California could be New York, could be Chicago, to fight, or do you leave and start a new life in a red state? And I elected to do that, because I believe that the situation in these extreme blue states is, for my lifetime at least, and maybe longer, hopeless.
Yeah.
And the best way to change those places would be for a lot of people to leave, which they are doing, and for the places to essentially implode, because they have to implode before they're going to correct themselves.
Yeah, I agree. It's what's interesting is, and Victor Davis Hanson and Dennis Prager are still in California. I mean, they've called that home for years.
Yeah. Well, Victor has a really good reason, because he's a farmer.
Yeah.
And he has a farm. I've been on his farm, many, many acres in near Fresno. And that, actually, that area has changed greatly too, he says, but it is much more like a red state in the eastern side of California than where I lived in the coastal part.
Roger, we're running out of time. Before I let you go, though, I did want to address a fear which I think you look at deeply into the book, is conservatives fear that all these people are moving away from blue states into red states, but then they're going to keep voting like they did back in the day. But your book says that's not happening. Can you just share that as a way to wrap up and
yes, okay,
alleviate some fears?
That's one of the theses of my book, because there was a mistaken thing going on in red states, that we were going to come here with our, quote, California values.
Right.
Actually, it was close to the reverse in many cases, because a lot of what goes on in red states is sort of blue states light. There's a lot of corruption. The Southern Republicans in office in many places are very similar to the old Southern Democrats, but wearing new clothes. And the people who moved were dreamers of a sort, who wanted to renew their love affair with the constitutional republic that we live in and have created. So there was a bit of a conflict of a surprising sort. It's slowly being resolved because both parties are learning from each other. But it was a surprising reversal that I describe in the book. The people coming from California I describe as the cavalry to save the South. Not a cavalry like in a John Ford movie that you know, with horses and all the rest and bugles, but in SUVs, etc. however, that's really happening in part, and it's kind of amusing on one level, distressing on another level, but ultimately optimistic.
Yeah.
Written American Refugees is an optimistic book, and we're refugees. But remember that refugees, real ones, legal ones, of course, who came from Poland, who came from Ireland, who came from Italy, who came from Greece, are what built America. And we're trying to rebuild it from the inside.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think you're right about the implosion. I think you're going to see some major implosions across the country, and only then we'll see some change. It's almost like maybe it's an odd comparison, but when you talk about an addict or someone dealing with demons of addiction, they have to hit rock bottom before their lives can turn around. I fear that's going to happen in cities across the country. Yeah. But well, Roger, thank you so much for sharing your time. I love having you on the show. And of course, pick up his new book, American Refugees, The Untold Story of the Mass Exodus from Blue States to Red States. It's available right now at any fine bookstore. And of course, you can get it at Amazon as well. Roger, I want to hear more about your future fiction plans. Maybe next time we can chat about that. But all the best, and thanks for checking in.
Thank you.
Oh, and about that trivia question, how many school days did our friend Ferris miss back in 1985 in Ferris Bueller's Day Off? Well, we'll let Principal Rooney share the news.
So far this semester, he has been absent 9 times.
9 times?
9 times.
We still need to save Ferris, now more than ever. All right, I can't think of any segue from that to the final conversation here, but I'm just going to barge right in. Hollywood stars can be thin-skinned. Very thin-skinned. And you know what? I get it. Completely get it. If you're a Hollywood star, you're judging your looks, your weight, how much money your last movie made. You name it, there's a reason to feel vulnerable, naked even. And that's true for troubled teen star Lindsay Lohan. She had a tough go of it back in the day. She was super famous. She was in all the tabloids. She was having some personal issues. Now, she's out of the spotlight for the most part. She seems happier. I don't blame her. I think she's maybe leading a more normal life. Good for her. But she is back on the screen briefly in a certain remake of one of her earlier hits. And this is going to be a spoiler alert, but I really can't share this story without spoiling something. The new movie is Mean Girls. That's the musical update on the Mean Girls film from 2004, and you will see Lindsay Lohan in the film. I'm not going to spoil how, but she is in there. But it turns out there was a joke in the film that has got her all hot and bothered in the worst way possible. Now, singer Megan Thee Stallion is in the movie. She's playing herself, and at one point, she makes a statement about the new film's heroine, a redheaded actress who's played by Angourie Rice. The singer says, "We are going back red. Y2K Firecrotch is back." Now, it turns out that gross phrase, it really does turn my stomach, was used back in 2006, and it referenced Lindsay Lohan. It was made by a socialite named Brandon Davis. I guess the clip went viral, or whatever you called it back in 2006. Now, I don't know who Brendan Davis is. I don't think I ever will. I don't care. I don't remember the incident, but clearly Lindsay Lohan does remember the incident. It impacted her directly, and I get that. But Variety, thank goodness, has reached out to Tina Fey, the film's writer, and Paramount Studios, the studio behind the movie, for comment. What will they say? Well, I'll know what I want to say. It's a joke. It's a movie. And Lindsay, I'm going to guess they wrote you a pretty large check for that cameo. Move on. Please. You're older, you're wiser, you're all grown up. You don't need this nonsense. It's a joke. Maybe you took it the wrong way. Maybe it was meant at you. I doubt it. Just move on. There are so many bigger things to worry about in life. You don't have to worry a nanosecond about a joke in a movie that celebrates both your famous hit and your comeback. That should be enough. Well, that's it for the show this week. Thank you to Radio America for having me as part of their great podcast lineup. And while I have your attention, I want you to drop by HollywoodInToto.com. It's a great website. I'm a little biased. It is updated 7 days a week. You've got news and reviews and commentary. It is, like this show, the right take on entertainment and woke-free since 2014. I'll see you next time.